I saw Web3 as this beautiful way to leverage the knowledge of the front lines of philanthropy in what we work on, which is helping everyone in America grow food at some point in their life. And it's a beautiful goal, very attainable. I believe that it's always hard work, but that this is an attainable goal. We can get every American growing food. And I was able to use Web3 to recruit hundreds and eventually thousands of nonprofits to join the cause. They were already doing it, but they were doing it individually.
Welcome to The Regeneration Will Be Funded. My name is Matthew Monahan, and in this series, we're exploring the intersections of regenerative finance, technology, and our living planet. Created with Ma Earth, you can find all of our conversations and more at maearth.com. Thanks for joining us. Today's guest is Kimball Musk of Big Green. Big Green is on a mission to get everyone in America growing food. Big Green DAO is one of the first, most visible experiments at the intersection of traditional philanthropy and Web3. In this discussion with Kimball, we talk about what is Big Green and Big Green DAO, how does it work, and what have been some of the lessons learned so far. Kimball reflects on the distribution of power and governance and what he thinks the impact and potential of Web3 will be on traditional philanthropic funding. This conversation will be particularly interesting, I think, to anyone coming from a traditional philanthropic or nonprofit lens, as well as those interested in ecological education, school gardens, and similar themes. This conversation was recorded in March 2023. On to the show with Kimball Musk. Welcome. Today we're here with Kimball Musk. Kimball is an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and the founder of Big Green, which we're here to discuss today. Thanks for being here, Kimball.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So what is Big Green?
Big Green is a beautiful nonprofit. We started it in 2010. We believe that growing food changes lives. It obviously improves your nutrition security, but it also improves your mental health, gets you out into nature, and it opens your eyes to the weather volatility created by climate change. Growing food changes your life. Our mission is to get everyone in America growing food at some point in their lifetime, so they can understand the benefits, they can connect to food, and really change their life in a positive way. I know that you have that experience yourself, and having a farm where you're serving your community, it's about as beautiful a thing as you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. It has changed my life to be involved in that process. Yeah. And I really resonate with that. And I'm curious, like what led you to this conclusion or this thesis and that articulation?
So I got into food in a unique way. I sold my first tech company in 1999. We were building maps in door-to-door directions for the internet. And it was a successful transaction, but I wasn't really that into tech. I've always loved cooking. So I would cook for my family when I was a kid. And it was always this beautiful feeling of when I would cook, everyone would sit down. I have a very busy, active family, as you know. But when I would cook, everyone would sit down and eat. And it was just a beautiful part of my life that when I got financial freedom, I thought to myself, I was 26, let me go do what I kind of always said in my head, let me go do a cooking degree, which is about as different as you can imagine. I went into this military style, full metal jacket, cooking school, very old school French Culinary Institute. And I remember like these little chefs like screaming at me all the time and thinking to myself, like, Kimball, it's okay. You got this. Just, you're here to learn. It was a very humbling experience, but it was about 18 months. And I graduated just before 9/11, and it was fortuitous because my mom, I was there, and that's a whole story of itself, but woke up to the sounds of the planes hitting the building. It was a very, very intense experience. Stayed at my mom's house, my mom's apartment, for about 14 days because we weren't allowed back where we were. And she got called up as a potential volunteer to cook for the firefighters. And she said, look, I don't know how to cook, but my son just got his diploma and he can cook for the firefighters. And I also had a security pass because when they allowed us back in, I would be allowed to go down to my apartment. And so it was kind of a unique set of circumstances. So for about 6 weeks, I had the honor of cooking for the firefighters. To give you perspective, there were millions of people trying every day to volunteer, and getting to volunteer was a thing. And more than that, I started out peeling potatoes and then worked my way up because everyone else was coming in for a couple of days at a time, and I just did every day. It was kind of a way to process the trauma. And we cooked for the firefighters, and I actually ended up going to the place where we would cook for them and serve them. And it was just one of the most beautiful, powerful experiences of my life to see them come out of these giant piles of melting metal covered in white dust, horrible white dust. And they would take off their shells, and then they would sit down and eat. They'd just be looking down and completely unable to function. And then they would eat food, and they would start a little chat back with another firefighter and another emergency worker. And by the end of that 45 minutes, they'd be back to life. And then they would put that shell back on, and they would go back out into that giant pile of melting metal. And just to be part of that experience, I decided, man, I got to go do a restaurant. I got to follow what is calling me. So we opened the kitchen in Boulder in 2004. It took me a couple of years to move to Boulder and find a location. And we opened in March of 2004, which is almost 20 years ago. And it's our 20th anniversary, March of 2024, which is just ridiculous to imagine. Wow. So it's been an incredible journey with the kitchen, but it's going really well. And during that process, I was financially free, so I didn't need to make money off the restaurant, and it was very profitable. And so I said, well, what could we do philanthropically to help our community? When you're in the restaurant world, you're very community focused. You're very much about, well, how can every restaurant is local. Like no matter how big of a chain you are, that restaurant is that general manager is like a mayor of their town or their little community. And we got to know school teachers. We got to know other nonprofits. We had an incredible team member of the kitchen start a nonprofit, which was helping kids grow food in their school. And he had a great innovation. In fact, he's a New Zealander, and he's now back in New Zealand. He's older now, but he had this great innovation to show teachers how to teach their exact same lessons in the school, in the school garden. And that was quite an innovation because everyone else was saying, this is an extra 30 minutes, so this is something else you should do. You should get the kids out of the garden and maybe do something extra with them. And that little small innovation, I looked at and I was like, wow, this is really working. Teachers are on board. They love being in the garden. And the way curriculum works in America, you know really to the detail of this paragraph. It will be taught on Tuesday, on March 21st of 2024, this paragraph. You know exactly what people are being taught. So, which good or bad, it's just how it is. And so you can give teachers lessons, and teachers came together. We did this until 2020, until COVID, till 2020. We built 650 outdoor classrooms in schools around the country, beautiful outdoor classrooms that teach kids science mostly through the growing of food. And this was just such an amazing innovation to teach. In science in particular, fifth grade, this is where the studies were, you bring a fifth grader out to learn that exact same science lesson in the garden that they would normally have been taught in the class. And you'd get a 15-point increase on a 100-point scale on average across every kid. It's incredible. And so it became a no-brainer and very, very successful until COVID. It was a wonderful learning experience for me to go through COVID, where we have this wonderful mission that we believe growing food changes lives. And we want people to grow food so it can change their life and improve their nutrition security and their mental health and nature and help with understanding climate change, all of these things. But the government said you are not allowed to do what you have been doing. You are not allowed to be on school grounds. Schools were closed. You are not allowed to teach kids. That's illegal. You're not allowed to show people even how. I mean, it's so insane what we had to go through. And we all kind of looked around the table and said, what are we going to do? Are we kind of done now? Should we go do other things with our lives? There's a wonderful group of very productive people. It's a nonprofit, but a really group of A-class players. Well, if we can't do that, should we go just find something else to do? And we actually had that soul searching. And in the end, we said, this is really important to us. How else can we do it? And so in August of 2021, schools were going back into class. It was still against the law for us to be on school grounds. We couldn't train teachers. We couldn't build gardens. We were essentially a general construction company building gardens as well as teacher training. Neither of those were allowed. And so we came up with this innovation to fund teachers directly. And this is one of the first steps to learning about Web3. And this is not a Web3 thing, but it taught us the pain of traditional finance. And what we raised funding, and we were able to fund about 500 teachers, direct grant $2,000. This was a decision made at the end of August. Funding was available middle of September. Okay, how do you do that?
And before you get into those mechanics, like that alone is a very bold statement to say on a very rapid turnaround, direct funding to teachers, fairly unrestricted grant making.
Not when we say in the nonprofit world, it's restricted. Well, that only matters if you're a nonprofit. If you give a teacher money directly, by definition, there is no control.
Right.
You're really you're trusting them to use it well.
And that word trust to me really just is demonstrated through that. And I'm curious, just as a meta, like your approach to philanthropy and what gave you that confidence, or what helped you get to that space of trust.
It's funny. I have worked with teachers now, tens of thousands of teachers, and I can't really think of one that I wouldn't trust. I'm sure that there are many that I don't know, but 99.9% of teachers are there because they love to teach. Right. And they're always better, and some people are better at it than others. But when we would talk to them over the years, a lot of the conversation was, you're going to spend $75,000 in a beautiful outdoor classroom. Thank you very much. I just need $100 for pencils. And we're like, well, we don't work in the space of our donors give for growing food changes lives. And sometimes we'd kind of go, well, let's just add $100 worth of pencils because you need pencils to write down some journaling in the garden. So we would find ways to help teachers, but it was this wonderful, decade-long experience where trust wasn't an issue with teachers. It was more of we absolutely knew teachers were very busy. And if we were to just send a check to every teacher in America, most of them wouldn't even know. They would just throw away the junk mail, because they'd be busy and they were treated like junk mail. And so we said to ourselves, okay, how do we make a decision on which teachers should receive? It's $2,000, real money for these teachers. How do we make a decision fast? And grant applications are not possible. So we thought to ourselves, let's start with a Zoom webinar. And we would do 3 or 4 weeks of managing different schedules and different time zones. And it was like in the first week of September, because we could do that without even prep on our side. And so we did a outreach to teachers. We've worked with teachers for a long time. We worked with school districts for a long time. So that was fairly easy. We had a lot of partners. Whole Kids Foundations helped out. The people who've been working in the space were all very helpful, and that's really beautiful. We got a couple of hundred to respond and join the Zoom webinar. And in this process, what we ended up doing was we did a Zoom webinar and then 2 online trainings and then a second Zoom webinar where you would basically just in the chat give us the EIC number, the employee identified. It's like a bank account number for your school, so we could assign the funding. It was simply just straight up, where do we send the check? So that, as easy as that sounds, turned out to be one of the hardest things we ever had to deal with. I mean, for 6, 7, 8 months, we still were dealing with return checks, and almost all the teachers received their funding. We got 500 teachers funded. Very proud of that program. And it's now morphed into other ways we work directly with teachers, which has been great. And really proud of the Big Green team this is not Web3, this is just our traditional work is now direct to teachers, working in partnership with schools, enabling them to do more of the work, but it also enables us to work with many more schools. So we're now in thousands of schools. And that is just one of the most beautiful outcomes of COVID, of like, wow, you're just in hell. Wait a minute, maybe there's another way. And we found we definitely had some scrapes along the way, but we found a way.
Yeah, it's like that permaculture principle. The problem is the solution, and it sounds like you.
That's right. Yeah.
You dealt with a very difficult circumstance, having an organization that was well tuned and functioning, getting gardens into schools, helping teachers with the curriculum, helping with the infrastructure side. COVID comes along and you either pivot and you find a new way, or you just close up shop and right. Call it a day. But because you wanted to stay true to that mission of growing food changes lives, you just kept finding the path forward, and now direct granting into teachers, enabling them to do this same line of work in terms of outdoor classrooms and ecological education, but maybe a bit more of a hands-off model for how much you're getting involved in any given school, which allows you to scale.
Yeah, it's more like a do-it-yourself approach. But what we also have learned, 2010 when we started was actually quite different to 2020. So even before COVID, we now are at 650 schools. It's about 1% of schools. We were focused on K through 8, K through 5. But 1% of schools is a lot. And that model was now learned and copied by school districts, which is the goal. And so even in 2020, when we were working in a district, we went into Oakland, for example, and we found out that even though we had donors around us to go build 100 learning gardens, we used to do 100 at a time that would justify the general construction, infrastructure, and so forth. But we were pleasantly surprised that most of the schools had a beautiful outdoor classroom that was a garden. They just needed a few other things that were more like curriculum and training and soil, and it definitely needed support. But the actual infrastructure was pretty well built out. And that was a combination of people like us, as well as a few other nonprofits, teaching the districts how to do this. And so we were kind of putting ourselves out of business, which was great. In a nonprofit world, we should be working on that. I think that's kind of the goal. But the change then was really welcomed, because we weren't giving $2,000 to a school without a garden. We actually were giving it to teachers who already had a garden and just needed to we called it Jumpstart, to jumpstart this garden that had been dormant for 18 months. And so I think that really helped a lot.
Yeah. And in the school garden space, my understanding is that a lot of them fizzle out if it's just the parents volunteering to do it, because then their kids grow older and then there's not necessarily that continuity. So it makes a lot of sense that you need the buy-in of the teachers and the principals. You
need the buy-in of the teachers, but we still, what we used to do pre-COVID, we would monitor all the gardens all the time. Green was good, yellow concerned, red is a problem. And we had a 99% success rate or higher. The new model, we're going to have to learn what the success rate is. And if it goes from 99% to 95%, but you get to work with 10 times more schools, it's okay. If it drops down to 50%, well, now we've got a problem. So I think it's very much a focus on, are we doing good things? Are the schools benefiting? What are the results? Let's evaluate carefully. And what's great about our donors, they supported us through the COVID change, even though we didn't know what we were doing, because they trusted us to do good things.
And I'm curious, are you bringing any of that passion for cooking into those classroom programs as well?
For sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
How does that look?
One of my favorite things to do with kids is we'll go do a harvest and we'll do a salsa. So you get some tomatoes, some cilantro, a little bit of little onions, a little bit of peppers, and you have a fun conversation with them. And you say to them, okay, guys, what level of spice do we want in this? And some kids will be like, no, I don't want any spice. But they don't understand at all that it comes from this chili. And we're like, we can just do a little bit of this spice because you guys kind of want a little. And then some kids will be like, no, let's go for it. And so teachings like that where kids, they even learn what a tomato is, they learn what a chili is, they learn, this is food that they've been growing, it's changing their life. Okay, let's also make it taste good.
Yeah, I remember reading research, I think it was out of Cornell, that the programs in the school gardens that incorporated the cooking aspect or the harvesting aspect, the retention over the long term was much greater. To me, it just feels so obvious that, we need ecological literacy. Let's do it from a young age. And why wouldn't we be teaching in the outdoors and still getting those core STEM subjects and art and everything else incorporated? There's a permaculture teacher that says you can solve all of the world's problems in a garden. It's just like we can teach so much in a garden.
There's so much about gardening where when I think of growing food changes lives, there's one of the most powerful things is if you look after your garden, it thrives.
Right.
Yeah, and the less you look after it, the worse it gets. And if you don't look after it at all, it dies. And that is just a powerful lesson for our kids when they can take with them in every aspect of their life. Look, you've got to look after a relationship, or you've got to look after a pet. Really, it's like this beautiful relationship to the world that they get at a young age.
Yeah, and taking responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so you've pivoted Big Green into this new direction, and then there's now Big Green DAO.
Sure.
So help me understand what's going on with that.
Yeah. So I was in this COVID world learning how to fund directly to teachers, and then learning this extremely difficult financial infrastructure. So mailing a check is a real drag. Honestly, I don't use checks. I haven't used them in years.
In New Zealand, they laugh if you even mention the idea of checks.
It's more like people still use checks. Okay, right. Well, this is you'd write the check, you'd put it in an envelope, you'd write the address on it, and 500 teachers is a lot of envelopes, a lot of checks. You have to go order the checks because you don't really use that many checks, and it was just silly. It was a silly process. We tried wiring, and wiring is a $40 fee, and you also have to go to the bank, and you have to do one wire at a time with a bank teller. It's a very real thing. And so this promise of easier financial tools using Web3 was, I was learning it from a lot of people. It was sort of the bubble time for Web3, so kind of hard to ignore. And I was going through this very difficult pain of funding teachers. So I thought to myself, let's explore this as a way to fund in a more I don't even know if I understood decentralized at that point, but clearly it was going to be a lot of small checks to a lot of people. Okay, that's difficult in the Web 2 world. Let's see what Web 3 could do. So that was the start of my exploration.
Gotcha. And so where did that then lead? Because now Big Green DAO, in my mind, is really one of the first, if not the first, visible experiments in this intersection of Web3 and philanthropy. You have over a year now under your belt in terms of a lot of lessons. So let's dig into those mechanics. How is it structured? What was the inspiration?
Yeah, the inspiration came from a few things. One, of course, was the difficulty of just financial movements. But the other one that I think was quite beautiful was this idea of decentralizing power. I'm a white guy, Musk last name. Everyone assumes I've got a lot of power. So, well, actually being on the funding side is pretty difficult. Now, it's obviously there are people who are in power because they just like power. But most people are, I believe, most people are trying to do good things with the power they have. And so in my case, I was trying to do good things to who should receive funding. And frankly, it was really hard. Like, okay, which teacher should receive funding? Well, they showed up on a Zoom webinar. They sound nice. I mean, that was about all I had. And I also didn't like the grant application process because for 10 years, we were a nonprofit submitting those grants. We still raise money, and anyone who wants to donate can go to dow.biggreen.org. But so we understand the pain of grant applications. We didn't want to add to that pain. But how else can you evaluate people? So this idea of decentralizing power, to me, selfishly, was pretty cool. Oh, I get to share the responsibility of who receives funding. In a sense, it was giving up power, and in a sense, it was getting a whole bunch of really thoughtful people from the front lines to help me do this.
That's so rather really cool. Than one guy at the top of the pyramid saying, here's who gets the money, what you're saying is you're sharing that decision-making amongst a larger group of people. Yeah, so I live in Boulder. It's a wonderful town, but it's easily an ivory tower if I don't include other voices. And we were pre-COVID fundraising and then deploying capital to schools. We had people in those communities, Detroit, Chicago, LA, Memphis, many, many cities. We had a real team on the ground. Now I moved to grant making, and the grant making is sending money. So we never did that before. That's a different thing. So also we don't have people on the ground in Omaha or in Atlanta or in different little small towns around the country. Really, how could you do it well? If you wanted to remove the grant making process, if you wanted to just do it differently. So I saw Web3 as this beautiful way to leverage the knowledge of the front lines of philanthropy in what we work on, which is helping everyone in America grow food at some point in their life. And it's a beautiful goal, very attainable. I believe that it's always hard work, but this is an attainable goal. We can get every American growing food. And I was able to use Web3 to recruit hundreds and eventually thousands of nonprofits to join the cause. They were already doing it, but they were doing it individually. With Web3 now, through this decentralized voting process, where they get to, so the way Big Green DAO works is if you donate at a certain level as determined by the DAO, and I don't even know what the level is. I'm not a member of the DAO other than as a donor, so I don't get to decide these rules. So these rules are all public and they're in Web3. But a donor at a certain level gets a vote, and then if you are a recipient of funding, you get a vote. So you started out with 6 people that we recruited, and one of them is a member of Big Green C3. Her name is Diana, and she is part of the committee. And the other is a group of rock stars that we recruited that we already knew from our past, help us do this. And they were spread out across the country. And we then said to them, okay, you have funding. The DAO has funding for Q1 for a certain amount of money. And they all decided, let's do 10 nonprofits to start. So that went from 6 to 16. And then in Q2 2022, they said, let's add the donors in as voters, plus let's do another round of donations. They donated, I think, $800,000 that quarter and added in maybe 40 nonprofits. And now you're starting to get at real numbers. Now you're at 56, 60 votes. And then what started to form was a Discord where all of these nonprofits would talk to each other and, help. They would kind of learn about each other and they would help with voting and so forth. And then Q3 last year, which was the end of the experiment, it would be 1 year, we got over 100 nonprofits involved, which in the world of the nonprofit space, to get 100 nonprofits collaborating is just amazing. I mean, I think that we didn't expect community at this level, but it became the superpower of what we created. Yes, there's funding received. Yes, there's voting. But the community that came out of it, where people now know each other from around the country, we did an October gathering where everyone shared the learning. Some people might be better at fundraising. Some people might be better at programming. Some people know how to work in this weather climate. Some people know how to work in this demographic.
And this shared learning was amazing. And so we ended the experiment September 30th. We celebrated it in October, and now we're just about to start the next phase.
Wow. Okay, so essentially you took an initial donation of funds and you gave it to 6 nonprofits that you had some pre-existing relationship and trust with. And then those 6 individual representatives had the voting power inside of the DAO, and they decided to then grant funds out to whatever it was, 30, 40. And then those additional nonprofits who come in now have voting power within the DAO. In addition to
they all, and everyone has an equal vote. So even though there's a DAO committee, they help design the white paper, make changes to the white paper. Everyone has the same vote, including the DAO committee members, in terms of an actual change being made.
Right. So it's very democratic, and you're just continuing to increase these concentric circles of participation. And what sounds like is resulting is, my experience in the nonprofit space and the environmental space is that there's lots of silos. And what you're suggesting is also that now we have this unique community of a lot of sharing and knowledge across different nonprofit organizations as well.
The shared learning, the community that's formed, when this was happening last year, I was like, wow, if nothing else happens, we have created something beautiful. This community will stick together. They're already interacting in ways that aren't even related to the DAO, which is beautiful. But when there's money involved, people will stay involved. So, okay, they received their grant last year. Wait a minute, if you're not an active member of the DAO, one of the rules in the white paper is if you do not vote for 2 consecutive rounds, your voting token burns up. And so these sort of things are automated. And if you don't vote, it's clearly known that you didn't vote, you're not going to necessarily get funding in the next time. So there is a rule, of course, when you want to go for funding, you do have to burn your token. Also, it's healthy, so you don't vote for your own funding. But the community also has a little bit of juice to it, where the more engaged we are, the more likely we'll get funded again. We're now starting to add more evaluation. Okay, how many people did you help grow food? How many schools did you help? What is the way you did it versus other people, and just kind of learning more. So to me, it's more about bringing shared learnings together to be more effective. That'll happen every October. But this DAO is virtual. And then in October, once a year, everyone gets together. And I will say that I was there for the October gathering last year. It was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I think one of the other things we did at Big Green DAO, which is very different to what others were doing in Web3 in 2021, is there was zero ability to speculate, zero ability to make money. You can receive funding as a nonprofit recipient, but it's still under IRS rules, and those guardrails are in place. A donor gets a tax deduction. You've got to be either a 501c3 or you have a fiscal conduit that will enable us to use philanthropic funds. So there were like these basic guardrails in place that also ensured no one could make money on this, or that would violate our IRS status. And it, in the middle of the bubble bursting, we were having the best experience you can imagine that came out of Web3. And so I'm really grateful for the community. That's been a wonderful, warm, welcoming community outside of growing food, just a general community. And then what we created was another, little microcosm of a warm, welcoming community of nonprofits dedicated to Americans growing food.
Amazing. And can you help me understand a bit of this relationship between the white paper, the Constitution? I mean, what you're really talking about here is innovations on new governance models, new organizational structures. What are you witnessing kind of at a meta level in and around that space?
Yeah, so Big Green DAO was this opportunity to create an entity with new governance. Like, if we could create a new governance structure, what would we create? Many people in the DAO world have a structure that still concentrates power in a few people. And so, well, if I were to create it, I would not want that. And I think the best example is the U.S. Constitution, which the founding fathers had similar ideals. So they had the king. King was a pain in the butt. They didn't want to enable the U.S. to have a king. So they designed something, and I put my 10,000 hours in. I've become a citizen. That alone is a you have to study for that. But also in 2021, designing the DAO, that as well as the parliamentary systems and others, where how can you create something that does not allow an individual to accumulate power? And there are some benevolent dictatorships out there, but even the benevolent one, someone passes away and then it's left to your kids or someone else. It doesn't work, right? So I wanted to imagine a world where the Big Green DAO could last forever. Well, if it does, we don't want to allow power to accumulate. So there was an intense study of the U.S. Constitution as well as other government systems that celebrated that one little nugget that we learned from our founding fathers, that America's not perfect, but by far has created the best governance system in the world.
And I think people coming from more of a conventional business or startup background sometimes look at what's happening in Web3 and say, yeah, it sounds nice, but that's a bit naive to think that these new organizational forms are going to be able to move as quickly, be as efficient, be as adaptive, because you're trying to do everything by consensus, and lots of voting and sitting around in circles doesn't work. What would you say to that?
I would say that all of those problems you describe, sitting around in circles, trying to figure out how to make decisions when you have to bring the group together, the frustration some people will have in the DAO that how we should move in this direction and versus that direction, that's all real. That's actually what happens. There's real, which I think is great. There are people who are intense members of the DAO that do not get their way. But the group at the end of the day does decide where to go, what to do next. And the DAO has decided this quarter to allocate $400,000, and this is the first quarter since the experiment, so they get to change the rules a little bit. The rules were different last year. But this quarter is $400,000, $10,000 to $25,000 grants, so meaningful grants, but focused on smaller nonprofits, so even more meaningful. And then in addition, they're working on a fellowship program, which would be probably chosen from the DAO community. Who are the ones that we want to celebrate? And that would kind of come into the October gathering. And it's wonderful to sit back as somewhat of a parent to this DAO. You know, if you get into the sausage making, there's a lot of sausage making going on. There's a lot of those committees. There's a lot of all of the challenges that people wish didn't exist when you put a whole bunch of people together. But if you just look at the outcome, it's pretty great. So I think that this DAO we've created, Big Green DAO, is doing good things. It's building on the past. It's learning from its mistakes. Clearly, there were mistakes last year, and that's okay. It's not perfect.
Right.
And there'll be mistakes this year. That's okay.
Right.
And there are some really, maybe potentially really good ideas that don't get through because there's a process that when you bring this group together, and that's okay.
Right.
Because we're in it for the long term.
So you put in that initial money, and then now this thing has grown and other donors come in. So how does that, what kind of sizes versus what you put in versus how much?
Yeah, so I put in $1 million to kick it off, and I expected to raise another $500,000 just in terms of, this is a cool idea. Let's see who else wants to participate. Within a few months, we had gotten almost 2,000 donors. We'd raised $6.5 million. And it was a real treasury. It was like, wow. And all of these are tax deductions for philanthropists. They knew what they were doing. They weren't buying a coin or anything like that.
Right.
And it really woke me up to the fact that people wanted a different philanthropic model. People wanted to see what Web3 could do for philanthropy. So we had a blend of two donors. One were people that were working in the existing philanthropic world and wanted an experiment like this to shake things up. those were kind of the initial donors, like $1.5, $2 million donors of the 6.5. Then we had another group, which were the Web3 community, saying, we really believe that this, and the white paper got analyzed to death by people, 6-hour-long YouTube videos of analyzing it. And I'm so grateful. One of the main architects of this was a guy named Matt Markman, who, academic out of the University of Hawaii, helped me design something that you could not speculate with, like really, really working hard to avoid that, which really wasn't the language of Web3 at the time. But what resulted were these Web3 donors that were so excited for Web3 to play a role in philanthropy. So it was like the traditional philanthropists to shake things up, and the Web3 guys, yeah, let's do this. So I think it was those two combined, kicked us off, and it's, I can't say enough good things, how it's been. I know that Web3 has gone through a very tough time, and I think that speculation has been brutal, and there are a lot of people that are in jail for that, and you got to be very careful about, there's so many issues with Web3 that are being resolved now through the bubble bursting. But I am really proud of me and the team, where we really thought carefully. So we didn't get caught up in the bubble bursting. We're just trying to do good things.
Sure. There was no speculation at the core of what you were doing. And how did you find, so you're within this Web3 world, and yet there's a lot of noise and a lot of speculation, and like, how did you find the Web3 community to work with? Who was maybe helpful along this journey as well? And any other comments about how you see this Web3 space shaping up?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed the process of forming the Big Green DAO, because I'm old enough to know that I don't know what I don't know. And so I interviewed maybe 50 contributors to the white paper that I probably personally spent 2 1-hour meetings with them, but they spent another 5 to 10 hours on it. And people like Kathy Woods, some amazing players in Web3 that would give me guidance I wouldn't necessarily always take, because they were so pro Web3. But most of the time when I said to people, hey, my goal is philanthropy and also no speculation, and I don't want power to be able to accumulate, help me with that, I would get the best, because these are super smart people. Everyone that I spoke to was intensely intellectual and excited and curious for this experiment. And so I felt like the community was about as warm and welcoming as you can imagine.
Awesome. So for people coming more from a philanthropic lens and looking into this space and wondering, is there a there? What are the efficiencies, or what's the way that decentralization can improve the grant making process? What are we learning? What are mistakes made? Offer your perspectives on some of those threads.
I think that we learned a lot of things. And when we started it, we thought we would be more efficient. Because you don't have the grant making process, you don't have the both on the foundation side as well as the grant recipient. We thought that it would be more effective because we'd have all this decentralized accountability and so forth. And I think that's all possibly true. I think that it is, time will tell if it's more efficient or more effective, because we discovered that it's not efficient at first. We have to onboard people, we have to get them on a wallet, and it's actually really hard. And you need a lot of hand-holding. These are nonprofits that have their
You thought checks was hard. Try Web3 wallets.
Yeah, exactly. So we learned actually that it was not as efficient as we wanted it to be. But long term, I'm a believer that someone will figure out how to make the onboarding process easier. And then is it more effective? Well, I think we learned last year. Last year, we had a broader focus on food justice for our first year of experimenting. And now we've decided to really stick to what we understand, which is helping everyone in America grow food. And that we feel very comfortable with. We can feel like we can not just learn evaluation, we can also learn different ways of doing it, different climates, different demographics, and so forth. And when we bring everyone together in October, they're able to learn from each other because they're all kind of all working on the same thing. So I think that time will tell if it's more efficient or more effective. That was the goal in the beginning. What it became, though, is this community of nonprofits collaborating on a single goal. And this community that we get where people are rooting for each other, they're learning from each other on Discord. Wow, that's incredible.
And for people who don't maybe have familiarity with Discord, it's essentially like a community messaging platform and kind of become the tool of choice for a lot of Web3 communities too.
Exactly. It's like a chat room, but you can divide it into different groups. So you'll get a chat room for Georgia, you'll get a chat room for Florida, you'll get a chat room for Chicago. Everything's different, and growing food is different in each one of those communities. And the challenge of growing in South Chicago is different to the challenge of North Chicago because they're different demographics and different communities. So everything kind of splits into different chat rooms, and everyone learns from each other. They get to know each other. And then when they vote, that voting process there's privacy to your vote, but there's also, you can share who you are in your vote if you want. And so there's a lot of, people will try to collaborate in the voting process. But the community that came out of it, I would say one of the most difficult things in having now worked as a nonprofit receiving funding, as well as a funder, is collaboration amongst nonprofits. And that sounds obvious. Well, it should be obvious, but actually they're competing for funding. They're their own entity in a different area that there's territorial challenges and egos get in the way, just like anything. And so getting a large group of nonprofits, which for us is over 100 across the country, to collaborate on a single goal. Wow. Yeah. It's just, that to me is, we've succeeded already. So I think the long-term goals of efficiency, effectiveness, sure, that matters. What we're seeing immediately is this community that's been formed. And every October now we'll do an in-person gathering, and that to me could survive me, could go beyond, could just keep going because it's not reliant on one person.
Right. So what I'm hearing is this pattern of, traditional model of philanthropy, one person or small group of trustees giving grants, maybe not necessarily out on the front lines, so not always as close to the problem as maybe others. What we're witnessing here is potentially a way to not only share that power, push that power to the edges, but also solve for one of the fundamental challenges of collaboration within the nonprofit space. Rather than everyone competing for checks and credit so that they can do better fundraising, what we actually have is unifying missions and these new digital tools, call them DAOs, call them different organizational structures, plus these new feature sets around voting and participation and so forth. It creates this new space and opportunities, and
the transparency. So what'll happen? This grant round, for example, this grant round, some of the previous grantees will be eligible now because it's been a year. The voting process is called quadratic voting, where depending on your number of votes and how many other people vote for it, it increases the dollar value that someone will receive. Some people will receive zero, and some people will receive 25,000. Everyone's on the Discord, and it's transparent. So it's still competitive, but the voting is not done at an ivory tower. It's done amongst each other. That creates a different dynamic. It's more of a healthy competition than the sort of territorial competition that's happened in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Quadratic funding is a mechanism, as I understand it, to distribute matching funds in a more democratic way, where it's not just based on the dollar amount being matched, but how many people are really putting their funds in, which I think addresses one of the cornerstone issues of our time around wealth inequality. And if people want to learn more about that, they can explore the Gitcoin community.
It's one of those. Yeah, Gitcoin is where we learned from. It's one of those things. It's very hard to explain, and it's very easy to use. So it's one of those things. If you ever get a chance to do quadratic
funding alone as a term,
term is hard to grok.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Just try it, and you'll see how it works.
Yeah.
You try and you try and vote too much for one nonprofit, your vote just gets weaker and weaker every time you add a vote. And if you get a whole bunch of people to vote for a nonprofit, they're going to receive more funding. So it's really a tool that encourages collaboration amongst voters. So it's a very useful, but again, if you got to try it, trying to explain it is hard.
Right. So, okay, I'm a teacher, or I'm a funder, I'm a Web3 enthusiast. Like, how do I get involved in Big Green?
Sure. So teachers, just go to biggreen.org, and you will learn that we do both Web3 funding as well as traditional school garden funding. If you're a donor, you can go to dow.biggreen.org. You can learn about the white paper. You can make a donation. You can learn about the DAO committee. You can get the full ins and outs. It's a fully transparent DAO. You can see where the votes are. You can see where the grant making is, and really encourage donors to get to know how it works, build a relationship with the DAO. If you want to join the Discord, there's no minimum donation. If you want to have a vote, the DAO changes the dollar level depending on the time. So really encourage donors to just go to dow.biggreen.org, join the Discord, and then kind of go from there. And if you're a recipient, we do grants rounds depending on the DAO. This year, we're going to do one in February, March. We're going to do another one in May, June. And then we're going to do this fellowship concept in Q3. But it's all kind of happening as it unfolds. Like, we don't know exactly what we're going to do because it's a DAO. So I think as a recipient, get in there and even if you're a recipient, you can donate $1 and you'll be able to join the Discord. It's the community that you want to join, and through that community, you'll probably also receive funding.
Amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, I really believe in this mission of growing food changes lives. And I think that the patterns and the experience of what's been established here is actually going to be applicable to many different philanthropic fields and causes. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing time with us. Is there any final messages or words you wanted to share?
I love the way you ended that. You know, I at Big Green, we believe growing food changes lives. We want to get everyone in America growing food at some point in their life. And sharing this message of Big Green DAO, I believe will help us be more successful in our mission of getting people in America to grow food, and also serve as a model for other causes, whether it's deforestation challenges and where decentralization could really help, to there's many ideas around flow funding where nonprofits are helping foundations make decisions. We're a good example, and I think people should learn, even if their interest is nothing to do with our mission. If they care about philanthropy, they need to learn about Big Green DAO.
Thanks for your time, Kimball.
Thank you.
I hope you got value from that discussion with Kimball. It feels like this intersection between Web3 and philanthropy is still so early. We're just getting started. I'm impressed with how much Big Green DAO has been able to accomplish in a relatively short period of time, and no doubt the learnings will inform future innovations in grant making. I also think we'll learn a lot from various open source software DAOs who are doing a lot of grants and experiments at scale. I'd highlight that key point from Kimball about how Web3 can support better coordination amongst a variety of organizations and actors within an ecosystem, especially as we see so many silos still within the nonprofit and environmental fields. To learn more and get involved, go to biggreen.org, where you can also make a donation and join the Big Green Discord. I also invite you to join the Ma Earth Discord, where we're talking about things like regenerative finance and the future of funding. Shout out to the episode that we did with Christiana Musk of Flourish Trust. All of our conversations are available at maearth.com. Please like, share, subscribe, and tune in for more. I'll see you next time.